The stench hits first: rot, smoke, sweat, and something worse, the sweet metallic sting of blood. A man drags a body by its ankles through the mud. The crowd parts. No one looks him in the eye. His hands are red to the wrist. He isn't a murderer. He's on the payroll. This is hidden by time. In the Middle Ages, survival was a profession. Every town needed bakers and smiths. Yes, but also men and women willing to touch what others wouldn't. The dead, the diseased, the waste, the condemned. They kept cities from collapsing under their own filth. And for that service, they were paid in coin and in curses. These were the dark trades. The jobs no one envied. Few survived, and none were forgiven. When plague struck, the living hired the doomed. Cartmen creaked through narrow lanes shouting, "Bring out your dead!" They lifted corpses stiff as boards, some still warm, some still breathing. The pay was a handful of coppers, enough for bread, never for dignity. They worked without masks or prayers. Rotting flesh burst beneath their shovels. Black buboes split open on contact. They slept near their pits because no tavern would take them in. They ate beside the graves they dug. When the carts were full, one chronicler wrote, they dumped bodies like firewood, and if a man coughed, they threw him in too. By morning the ground moved, not from ghosts, but from the gas of thousands of corpses pushing upward. Most burials didn't last a season. Those who did carried the smell of death forever. No amount of washing could lift it from their skin. Far from plague pits, another set of hands was busy. The executioner had a helper, a man paid to hold, clean, and finish. He sharpened blades, tied ropes, mopped blood. When the headsman's arm trembled or the axe slipped, it was the assistant who stepped forward and tore at what remained. They were outcasts. Children born to the trade inherited their father's exile. No one would marry them. Priests refused them communion. They lived on the edge of town, where the wind carried the smell of the gallows away from the market. After every beheading, they boiled the straw, scrubbed the block, and gathered the severed head for display. If the condemned was famous, the assistant might be ordered to hold the head aloft until the eyes glazed white. For this, he earned roughly what a shoemaker made in a week. When the axe slipped, an old German record notes, it was the apprentice who finished the job, with his bare hands. Some went mad. Others drank themselves numb. A few began to enjoy it. Those were the ones the crowd feared most. Every castle, every city, every tavern produced waste, and someone had to shovel it. Gong farmers, named after the gong or dung they collected, worked by lantern light, waist deep in cesspits. They scraped and scooped with wooden paddles, filling buckets until the floor of the pit gleamed with slick mud. The air could kill a man in minutes. Methane and ammonia built up until one breath dropped him face first into the muck. To stay alive, they tied ropes around their waists, so partners could haul them out when they fainted. Sometimes only the rope came back. Their pay was decent, a few pennies more than a labourer, but they weren't allowed inside city walls during daylight. Their houses stood downwind, beyond the fields, where the smell already lived. Some died buried alive, a London chronicler wrote, drowned in filth that was not even their own. By dawn, they hauled the buckets to the river and dumped them upstream of the next village. Cleanliness, medieval style. Medicine demanded blood, not just letting it out, taking it back in jars. And so, there were leech collectors. They waded barefoot into marshes, skirts hitched to the knee, letting the worms find them. Each step sent a ripple through the green water, and black slivers fastened to their skin. They waited until their legs were striped with movement, then scraped the leeches into clay pots. Women did this most often. They said female blood was sweeter. Many fainted from blood loss before their pots were full. Others developed infections that ate through the flesh. By the time her jar was full, a physician wrote, her legs were white as bone. The jars were sold to barbers and surgeons who kept leeches for balancing humours. 1,000 parasites to cure a single fever. The collectors rarely lived long enough to see if it worked. When disease returned, and it always did, another trade emerged: the cleaners. They were hired to fumigate infected homes or destroy them entirely. Armed with torches, vinegar, and ignorance, they stepped into houses still echoing with coughs. Their orders were simple: burn everything. Clothes, bedding, furniture, sometimes the walls themselves. If a survivor begged at the door, they barred it shut. If a body lay too swollen to move, they rolled it into the fire. To the healthy, they were heroes. To everyone else, monsters. When outbreaks ended, mobs hunted them through the streets, blaming them for the plague they tried to erase. They carried torches not to see, a Venetian note reads, but to burn every trace of the living and the dead. Few escaped both the disease and the hatred. Most vanished into the ash they left behind. Not every dark trade wore rags. Some wore silk. But their danger was no less real. Medieval tax collectors served kings and bishops, squeezing coin from peasants who had none. They counted bushels, tallied debts, and took livestock when money failed. They were the face of starvation, and people remembered faces. Many rode with guards. Others never came back. Whole villages ambushed collectors, burying them in the very grain they seized. Some were boiled in their own ledgers. The parchment turned to soup. They came for silver, one monk recorded, and paid in skin. It was one of the few professions where wealth meant nothing. A full purse only made you a better target. And then there were the moral cleaners, the ones who traded in guilt. Pardoners, indulgence sellers, and confessors who turned forgiveness into business. They carried scrolls promising salvation for coin, selling God's mercy by weight. When the Black Death emptied half of Europe, they made fortunes absolving the terrified. Some forged relics, bottling holy tears or splinters of Christ's cross. Others promised to erase adultery, murder, even heresy, for a price. For the cost of a loaf, one priest whispered, you could buy your way out of hell. Many were later burned for fraud, but for a time they were untouchable. Their trade was sin itself. Rats carried death, but they also paid rent. Cities hired rat catchers to stem infestations, and apothecaries bought the carcasses for experiments. Armed with sticks, smoke, and tiny dogs, the catchers crawled through sewers where the walls moved. They made poisons from crushed herbs and arsenic. They were supposed to kill the rats, but the rats bit back. Bites festered, fevers raged, and within weeks, the hunters became patients. A good catcher, said one London record, was dead by 40, eaten from the ankle up. When plague struck, their bodies were the first to be burned. No one wanted to risk what they carried under their nails. Leather kept the world clothed. Boots, armour, belts, scrolls. But tanning hides was hell. The process began with rot. Skins soaked for weeks in urine, lime, and dung to strip off the hair. Tanners worked bare-armed in pits of chemical filth, scraping flesh with iron knives. The smell clung to them so thick that towns banished tanneries to the outskirts. Their children were marked by scent before they could speak. The air there, wrote a French traveller, was thick enough to chew. They lived longer than gong farmers, but not happier. Their lungs blackened, their teeth dissolved, and their world stank of the dead. During plagues and executions alike, someone had to ring the bells. They did it through the night, warning the living to stay inside. Each toll meant another gone. Ringers climbed towers thick with smoke from funeral pyres. Lightning struck many. Exhaustion took the rest. Their ears bled from the constant roar. Some believed the sound itself carried disease. They rang until their hands blistered, a chronicler wrote. And still the dying did not stop. When silence finally came, they were often the last alive. These were not villains. They were the scaffolding of civilization, the invisible hands that kept filth, disease, and death from consuming the rest. They were despised, mocked, exiled, and essential. History remembers the kings who ordered the work, not the ones who did it. But it was these people who kept the world turning while everyone else looked away. They touched what others feared, cleaned what others spoiled, buried what others killed, and in return, they inherited the darkness they removed. They kept others clean, a monk once wrote, and so were never clean again. This was hidden by time. Subscribe for more stories. History tried to bury, because the past doesn't stay dead, it festers.